All right, joined now by Mark Mix from National Right to Work. And hey, Mark, appreciate you being back on, man. Thanks so much. When it comes to the election, obviously electoral politics matter in a huge way. But you and I, over the past couple of years, have talked about some legislation that Democrats have tried to push through regarding essentially forced unionism. And I didn't even think until Jacob sent me that note yesterday about the fact that some unions aren't just worried about trade policy. They're not just worried about manufacturing stuff and all that sort of thing. They're saying, wait a minute, if we get this administration, man, they're going to be really pro-union to the point of maybe supporting forced unionism. What is it that's at stake right now? And what are the conversations that maybe aren't in the headlines but should be?
Yeah, I appreciate that. My daughters have told me that now that I'm over 60, that any kind of dance moves at all are prohibited and I shouldn't do anything. So, I get it. I have no dance moves anymore. But anyway, the Harris-Biden administration has a lot of dance moves, and they're related to forced unionism. I think organized labor union officials, the top levels of the union movement, are very interested in the continuation of the Biden-Harris administration policies when it comes to, Mike, as you mentioned, forced unionism. And one of the best examples is the so-called PRO Act, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which Kamala Harris has come out strongly in favor of, says she has to have it on her desk, she has to sign it. And the first thing that would do, Mike, is repeal all the right to work laws in the country, which allow workers the choice of whether or not to financially support a labor union. So right there is your pro-forced unionism private sector bill. If they pass that, then workers in all 50 states will be subject to being forced to pay union dues or fees in order to get or keep a job. That's outrageous. Secondly, the National Labor Relations Board. The National Labor Relations Board is the 5-member board that adjudicates labor policy and settles the disputes between what are unions and business now. The employees are completely left out of that equation, even though they were the primary reason for its passage back in the 1930s. The employees have no voice in there. It's a battle between big labor and big business. And they want to continue the NLRB's focus on putting their thumb on the scale in favor of forced unionism. In fact, right now, Bernie Sanders is trying to ram through a 5-year appointment of a Biden nomination to basically secure the NLRB until the year 2029. And there's been no hearings on these people, but they're going to try to ram that through in September. So that's kind of the energy that's out there to maintain this government power that's empowering union officials, not the desires of workers across America, but the government power that's been established under the Biden-Harris administration.
Morning, Mark. Gabe Pfeiffer here. So Mike mentioned it earlier that the Trump campaign is enjoying a lot of union support in comparison to previous Republican nominees. What do you think are the competing interests between the unions that's causing a kind of an unprecedented political split?
Yeah, well, Gabe, let me just kind of clarify that a little bit, because I think Trump is enjoying increased support from rank-and-file union members. Mm-hmm. Right now, most of the big unions have already endorsed Kamala Harris, the UAW, the AFSCME, SEIU, the AFL-CIO. There's one kind of big union that's holding out right now, and that's the Teamsters. If you remember, Sean O'Brien spoke at the Republican National Convention, and he was talking about, how they need to support any candidate that will stand with them. So the only one that really hasn't come out and said that they're for Harris is the Teamsters Union. And the police benevolent associations and some of the police unions and firefighter unions have backed Trump. And that's been consistent throughout 2016 and 2020. But to your point, Gabe, the disconnect between union officials' endorsements and rank-and-file workers is growing wider and wider. And that's where Trump is picking up some energy.
And what is this about? And I got to admit that I have not seen the stories on these United Auto Workers, which, there's a big presence of them here in the St. Louis area, filing federal complaints against Trump and Elon Musk. What is that all about?
Yeah, Mike, that would be like Gabe, you and me and Stella all talking about unions, and all of a sudden, because we upset Sean Fain, the president of the United Auto Workers, by saying something that was maybe derogatory about compulsory unionism or their power, they file a charge with the National Labor Relations Board, a so-called unfair labor practice charge against President Trump and Elon Musk. And they were talking, and this was that am I supposed to say formerly known as Twitter, interview that they did that what 46 million people or 100 million people listened to. And he was upset that they talked about a workplace dispute and how they might settle it without any specifics at all, just conversations like this. and all of a sudden they have a charge filed against him at the National Labor Relations Board. It's all about PR. It's all about attacking Trump and framing it like somehow he's against workers when he's not. His agenda is pro-worker. It's the agenda of the top union officials across the country that is anti-worker, and you can see that over the 3.5-year legacy of the Biden administration. They've given union officials more power, but they've taken away power from individual workers and union members, frankly, across the country.
Hey, Mark, we're visiting with Mark Mix from National Right to Work. It's interesting you mentioned Sean Fain speaking at the Republican National Convention, and that raised some eyebrows, among those on the right. Some would say, hey, good politics by the unions, realize that some of their rank and file also vote Republican. Also, if you hate one side, then you're basically going to be all win or all loss on election day. So I get the politics of it, but is the pro-union side, is the anti-right to work side making gains across the board? Like last week, for instance, Josh Hawley was doing an interview at the state fair, and he flat out says, I've changed my mind. I'm now pro-union. I'm now anti-right to work. And I think that caught a lot of people off guard.
Yeah, well, it was Sean O'Brien at the RNC meeting, the Teamster.
O'Brien. Yeah.
Sean O'Brien. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. But he's a politician too, Mike, and he's got to win elections among his workers. And he's probably the most aware of that a great majority of Teamsters are going to vote for Donald Trump because of his policy and his agenda. As for Josh Hawley, that's really a sad story. When Josh ran the first time, he was, pro-right to work, and he said he believes in individual freedom and liberty. And now his signature line on right to work is really shocking. It says, I would never impose right to work on anyone. And that's a complete lack of understanding of the compulsion and force that exists in federal law and how it was imposed on workers. I mean, he's a smart guy. I know that. But this position of him is just unprecedented. And I think the union officials in Missouri have responded by calling him out as a fake and endorsing Kuntz in this race for the most part. Yeah, it's really shocking that he would say something like that. And the predicate is he would never impose right to work. Well, it was forced unionism that was imposed on America back in the 1930s. That was imposed on America by the Roosevelt administration. That force and that compulsion is imposed on Americans. And the only way they can get out of it is passing right to work laws, which gives workers the choice to choose whether or not they support or want to financially support a labor union. So Josh Hawley is completely out in outer space on this issue, and he doesn't understand it, obviously.
Mark, now what's this about anti-Israel union bosses on college campuses forcing Jewish students to fund their activities? What's going on there?
Yeah, Gabe, this is really an unfortunate part, and it's really kind of a real formal moment of identifying the power of unions when they have the right to force you to associate with them. We've been representing graduate students across the country at MIT specifically. We had 5 clients there who are Jewish students who are doctoral candidates, and they have fellowships with the university, and they're forced to associate with the union, the UAW. In this case, it was the United Electrical Workers Union. They were forced to associate and pay dues to a union that was fomenting and promoting and paying for those riots and protests on the college campuses about the boycott, divest, sanction Israel, and then after October 7th, those things blew up across the country, those protests. But yet these college students, these doctorate candidates and graduate students, are forced to associate with a union that literally is calling for the demise of Israel, and from the river to the sea, and the divestiture and the sanctions and the boycotts of Israel. And they're saying, how in the world can I be forced to associate with an organization that is actually against my culture, against my religion, against my ethnicity, whatever it is, and still maintain kind of my integrity and my religious views? Well, at MIT, they said they couldn't, and we've got the campus to stand down, we've got the union to stand down, and so these graduate students will still be forced to pay something, but they can choose a charity, and they've chosen charities, relief charities in Israel, to have this money taken out of their paychecks, their fellowship, and sent. But this is, Gabe, this is exactly the injustice of forced unionism, is that because unions have this compulsory power, they can basically go out there and do whatever they want. As Mike said earlier, they don't care about the shop floor, the manufacturing job growth, or whatever. They're playing raw politics, and when those politics bump into or basically insult or assault someone's ideological views, that's when this gets exposed. And we're seeing this all over the country. It's starting again now that school's back in. We're representing graduate students, we're helping graduate students at University of Chicago, MIT, Dartmouth, other schools that are calling in that are saying, how can I be forced to associate with these people that don't like me, that hate me, that actually are working against my interests?
as much as I hate to hear, the fact that this thing happened at all, it is good to hear that there's some good news coming out of my alma mater there.
I was going to say, because that strikes.
You're an MIT. Oh, that's right. I forget. You're a rocket scientist. You're at MIT.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. I've been hearing so much bad news coming out of the alma mater there. I was looking for something, so you gave me something. I appreciate it.
All right, Mark Mix, National Right to Work, the way for people to follow what you're doing, because just unfortunately, obviously here in the St. Louis area, the right to work issue not going to be on the ballot anytime soon. But now with the shifts in the U.S. Senate race, and of course with a big union presence here in the area, and then every college campus now possibly dealing with something like this, people are going to keep up with what you're doing. How do they do that, Mark? What's the best way?
Yeah, if they're interested in their legal rights and exercising those legal rights in the workplace, they can go to the foundation's website, which was nrtw.org, nrtw.org. If they're interested in legislation and kind of following the ups and downs of Josh Hawley's political view on forced unionism, they can go to the committee site at nrtwc.org, nrtwc.org.
All right, good talk to you again, Mark. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks, guys.